Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I've got a rather bizarre set of encounters to share with you. Some that'll leave you intrigued and some that'll leave you creeped right out. Before we get into today's upload, though, a couple links. I'd also like to thank everybody who sent their prayers and well wishes to my daughter. She's still very much under the weather, but she is resting. I'm keeping her hydrated and trying to fight the chills. Anyway, as you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. All those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fan fiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that, well, they really just don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. Now I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first subscriber submission. Hey Jeff, I promised you that I would email you about what's been going on with me up here in Idaho lately. I hope you saw my post. I haven't had much time lately due to work and life in general. Anyway, we have 2 Dogman living on my parents' barn right now. So far, they're leaving us alone. I just hope it stays that way. I know what one may think, but I swear they are there. I've seen them with my own eyes. There is one that's about 7 to 8 feet tall and another that's about 8 to 9 feet tall. They're usually standing inside of the barn, watching me whenever I take my daughter's dog out to go potty at night, with our other 2 dogs. We've seen their tracks in the snow. I've heard the howling at night when they are hunting in the canal that runs just behind my parents' home. We have deer, coon, squirrels, moose, elk, coyote, birds, and, unfortunately, pets, and also stray animals people have dropped off in the country. I know they are Dogman because they look exactly like what I saw when I was 16 or 17 in a cemetery here where I live. I'm not sure if you remember that encounter. You read it and I sent it to you. I think maybe they are a mating pair. Anyway, my mom keeps seeing these shimmering thing at night, and then I see these 2 Dogman in the barn, so I'm leaning towards a camouflage of some sort. They are canine-type Dogman, meaning they look like giant wolves walking upright on their hind legs. Honestly, you might think I'm crazy, but I think they're beautiful. So far, they haven't bothered us, and we haven't bothered them but to shine the flashlight on their eyes to see their eyes shine at night when I take the dogs out. If I see the shine, I know I'm okay. It's when I don't see it is when I get nervous. The other night, the wind was blowing, and the tarp that is stretched over the opening in the barn where my dad used to put his boat when he was still with us was flapping around. I was watching, and the smaller one was playing peekaboo out through the hole that is in it from years of being hung there. I had to laugh because it was just like if a dog was to do the same thing through a paper bag or something like that. It was so funny. They heard me laughing, and the one that was doing it snorted and made a weird noise, like a cross between a woof and a growl. It sounded just like when my daughter's dog, who happens to be a German Shepherd mix, I think he's full-blooded German Shepherd because he looks like it, starts making a noise to let us know that he's hungry or needs to go out. He makes this woo sound. And that's what this one did, so it made me laugh more. The dog's just staring at them and not making a sound. Thor, my daughter's dog, was looking over their way and was sniffing and whining. Very softly. It's like he knew they were there, and he also knew they weren't going to hurt us. But he was still wary. They've been out there for about a week now and nothing's happened, so I have come to the conclusion that as long as they don't try to hurt us or our animals, they can stay in the barn as long as they want. I am sure they will move once the animals start heading up to higher ground. The animals usually come down closer to people during the winter because food is easier to find down here. The Dogman have a good water source as well with the snow we have had and the cattle and sheep ranches we have around here too. I forgot to mention them as a source of food for the Dogman as well. I haven't heard any attacks on any of the domestic livestock around here, so they seem to be hunting only wild animals or strays. Don't ask me why they haven't done the usual and tried to scare the hell out of us, but I believe in they live and let live. As long as they stay away from the house and our pets, they can stay. Anyway, I wanted to share this with you because I trust you, and I know you won't think I'm just crazy. I showed them to my mom the other night, and she went as pale as a ghost. LOL. I don't think she believed me when I told her we have 2 Dogman out in the barn. Very briefly, that was submitted to me back in March. For those of you who are curious about the first encounter she had, I'll share that with you guys really quick. I grew up in Idaho, and I am an avid animal lover, especially wolves. I've loved them since I was young. I'm writing to tell you about my Dogman encounter when I was around 16 or 17 years old. I would have been around 86 or 87. I graduated from high school in 89 before this encounter. I believed in spirits, but thought these things were just myth. Legends told by adults to scare children into staying inside at night. I loved the night and feared very little that was out there. I've grown up camping, fishing, and going on hunting trips. I don't hunt, but members of my family do. With my family, and I still love to do these things to this day. I don't fear the woods, but I am extra cautious in them now that I know that these things are out there. Anyway, myself, my friend L, female, and my other friend B, male, decided one night that we were going to go to the local cemetery and look for what is called the knocking grave and the werewolf grave. We found the knocking grave and discovered that it was just a loose board which vibrates back when you knock on the grave. We never found the werewolf grave, so we just chalked it up to being a myth. At this point, we decided to go back to the car, and we're talking when L and B decided they wanted some alone time. They were a couple back then. I got out of the car and decided to walk around the cemetery by myself. It was a beautiful night and the full moon was shining above. Ironic, I know. I was walking along looking at the old gravestones and thinking of how sad it is that so many people are completely forgotten after they die, when I heard a strange sound to my left. I was standing near a mausoleum looking down into another part of the cemetery. I heard the sound again and started walking towards it. It sounded as though something was crunching on something. I stood there for a minute listening. I immediately noticed how quiet it had gotten in the cemetery, and the hair stood up on my neck and arms. Usually there is noise from cars or dogs barking or crickets or something like that, but there was nothing. Then I saw a silhouette of something big and black standing a little ways away from me. Around 25 feet, just to be exact. Something told me to back away slowly and leave now, but I ignored it. I crept closer to the creature, never taking my eyes off of it. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I could see very well, especially with the moonlight helping light up the night. What I saw terrified me and also piqued my curiosity. The creature first looked like a huge wolf, but the front legs and torso were abnormally large, and the back legs were huge as well. It had a long, furry tail behind it, just like a wolf's tail. The head was huge, and it had long, pointed ears with tufts of fur at the tips, from what I could see, and it was leaning down and was eating something. The sounds I had heard was the crunching it made when it bit into whatever it was eating. I was excited because I had always wanted to see a wild wolf, and I thought that's what I was looking at. I figured that maybe a wolf had escaped the zoo that was right next door to the cemetery and had caught a rabbit or something. I realized, though, that the zoo didn't have a wolf in it, and hadn't had one for years. That made me even get more excited and curious. I stared at the creature for about a minute or so, and then I shifted my legs to get more comfortable, and I must have stepped on a twig or scuffed my feet because the creature suddenly stopped eating, looked up and turned its head my way. It then stood up on its back legs, and I heard a loud pop. That's when I realized this was not a huge wolf. It was black and had a few brownish streaks in its fur. When it stood up, I saw its head, chest, stomach, and lower body. The shoulders and chest were massive and covered in fur that tapered down as you looked at the stomach area and legs. It reminded me of a bodybuilder on steroids just because of how muscular it was. As it stood there, it started to sniff the air, and it stopped and stared my way. The eyes were a deep orange gold and seemed to glow in the moonlight. It looked at me, and I felt fear grow deep within me that I had never felt before. I knew it saw me, and I knew I had made a huge mistake by not leaving when I first got that bad feeling. I felt as though everything went cold and this creature could see within my soul. It stared at me for a minute, and then it opened its mouth and bared its teeth at me, as if it was smiling. The teeth were huge and yellowish white, and they looked very sharp, just right for ripping its prey apart. It never took its eyes off of me. It then lifted its arm and took a bite out of whatever it was eating. I then realized the sound that I heard was its crunching bone and tearing of flesh as it ate its meal. The hands were like elongated paws, and at the end of each finger were huge black claws that gripped the leg of what it was eating. I stood there watching it eat for what seemed like hours, when it could have only been a few minutes. He never took his eyes off of me. The fear I felt overwhelmed me. I felt sick, and I was visibly shaking, and so I did the only thing that I had been taught never to do when confronted with a predator. I turned and ran as fast as I could back to the car. I did not care. I couldn't get his eyes out of my head, and that smile, those teeth. I could imagine it catching me and ripping me to shreds as I ran. I made it to the car, though. I flung open the door and jumped in, screaming for B to start the car and get us out of there. They asked me what was wrong, and I just yelled at them to go now. B looked at me and saw the terror look on my face, so we started the car and we left. I never went back to that cemetery again. Later that night, I told B and L what I had seen, and they both laughed at me and told me it was just my mind playing tricks on me, which made me feel hurt that they didn't believe me. But I could hardly believe myself. I saw a werewolf, or what is referred to as a dogman, and I will never forget about it. I tried to find more about these creatures, but all I could really find was myth and folklore. I never told anyone else about this until recently when I told my 21-year-old daughter what I had seen. She believed me because she has seen things herself, and she knows I wouldn't lie to her, especially about something like this. She could see the terror in my face and hear it in my voice as I relayed the story to her. Since my encounter, I have had trouble sleeping at night and cannot sleep in the dark. I have to have a nightlight on. I will still have nightmares about it every now and then. I know this creature could have likely killed me with one swipe of its massive paw, but that night I was glad that it had something else to preoccupy its time with. In my opinion, these creatures are ancient and have learned to adapt quite well to the changes it has faced with the population of man and the encroachment into its territory. I don't think they fear us because they know they have a huge advantage over us with their strength, speed, intelligence, and cunning, not to mention their arsenal of weapons. As crazy as it sounds, I am curious about these creatures and would love to learn more about them. These creatures are real and they are out there. Please be safe and aware, everyone. Thank you for listening. Tonight's final encounter comes to us from Central Florida. A little bit of backstory first. I used to roll with 3 of the most self-destructive guys on the planet. We were constantly in juvenile detention centers. Hell, they had even nicknamed us the Four Horsemen. I was a scrappy-ass guy and a vandal. My friend Tony was just as scrappy and honestly, most of the time, was just guilty of being black in the South, in an iffy situation. My friend Jimmy's older brother was a huge drug dealer, so he was permanently on drugs, and our friend Kyle had lost a leg. He played that fake leg angle so hard to get away with shit that he was just a straight-up criminal. We'd smash windows and smoke pot or take acid. Kyle would steal cars and break into stores at night. The 4 of us stuck together because no one else cared or trusted us, with good reason. No good parent amongst the 4 of us. Love and support were shit on the Disney Channel. That didn't exist. So when someone got released from JDC, we would steal a bunch of beer, get a bunch of pot, and score some acid, shrooms, and take them out in the swamp to get insanely fucked up. Kind of our little welcome home ritual. The swamp was no man's land. The alligators, boars, bugs, humidity, mud, and crazy redneck meth heads kept all the respectable people away. So, as 4 guys with no future, it was the flame to our moths. I was about 17 at the time, and Tony was getting out after an altercation with some skinheads. In the rural South, they aren't all that uncommon. And while Tony basically got attacked with his priors and skin tone, they threw the book at him. Me, Jimmy, Jimmy's brother, and Kyle had already kicked the crap out of them while he was locked up. There was nothing left to do but go raise hell. So Kyle stole his grandmother's old-ass Buick Regal. We loaded it up with the party supplies, and we were off at 85 miles an hour towards the deep swamp, guzzling beers to 9-inch nails. The ride took about 45 minutes, enough time to smoke some bowls and drink 4 or 5 beers each. We were on our way to get obliterated. Well, the closer you get to the swamp, the crappier the roads get. With the mud and all, it gets harder to maintain them. So if you're messed up, you never really get to the same place twice. Because after a while, it just gets twisted like spider webs of where you think you can drive. We managed to park at what seemed like it was a place to park, and started to walk off when Jimmy stopped us. He smiled really big as he whipped out a bag of shrooms from his pants. We all split the bag into 4 portions, then, without pausing, ate a fistful of magic mushrooms each. Like I said, if destroying your life was a sport, we were pros. Then we returned to walking into the dark and isolated swamp woods, thinking, as always, we were invincible. I had a backpack full of beer, I mean full. We swiped as much of a pallet as we could carry. Jimmy had all of the pot on him, because he wore those Janko jeans with giant pockets. Kyle played that I ain't got 2 legs, so I can't carry shit card, as always, and Tony had the gun. I know that's going to worry some people, but we rarely had used guns, but deep in the swamp with alligators, boars, and the non-0% chance of a meth-crazed redneck, you want one around just in case. No one is winning a fist fight against an alligator, trust me. Normally how these trips go is we walk on kind of a hike and explore. The drugs kick in and make everything a lot more interesting. We spend the night trying to freak each other out and have fun by breaking, burning, climbing things. Then we spend the morning hung over as hell trying to find the car. It was actually a lot of fun most of the times, and there were no repercussions. The shroom started kicking in as the sun started setting. I remember seeing swirls in that stretched out shadow of the trees and water. The forest took on an orange hue that filled me with warmth as we all started settling down with bad jokes and started climbing over things deeper into the swamp. We weren't so much trying to be quiet, but with some of the dangers around, we weren't trying to be too loud either. More talking in hushed tones, and you can tell that all of us were just vibing with the sense of adventure at that moment. It was common at the beginning, kind of attuning to nature and feeling the openness, taking it in and letting each other take it in too. I started to get a really bad feeling as it got darker, but I pushed it away, thinking I was just trying to ruin my trip, and the forest was getting spooky on me for a second. When you hallucinate, you have to watch how you first feel, because if you give in to bad feelings, you're hallucinating bad things. So generally, if you keep your spirits and reinforce good feelings, you have a good time. I could kind of feel that all of us had just shook off the bad feeling, though, that had planted this little seed of doubt in my head. As we got over the bog and started going up, Kyle started complaining about his leg. He did this when he chickened out, but you were never completely sure. All of us doubled back to the car so he could sleep it off in the back seat. A lot of the time he needed help getting over the logs and stuff, so we had to take him. I noticed coming back towards the car felt a lot better than going deep into the woods, but I mean the familiar verse, the unknown, and I didn't want to pussy out like Kyle and ruin the whole thing. 3 was still a party. We headed off exactly like we had done before. Once we got a little further, though, I noticed one of the logs I had used not 5 minutes before had moved. I didn't know why, but this upset me greatly. I stupidly didn't say anything and just tried to swallow it. The pleasant hum that had been in my ears since I started tripping turned into a high-pitched whine, almost like a siren. We went back over some ponds and into the deep forest, where it got really dark. Without Kyle there, we moved a lot faster. After about 30 minutes of climbing over rocks and branches and pushing in between trees and shrubs, violent shaking of the brush to the side of us made us stop. It wasn't really close, about 20-25 feet away, but that was still too close. And whatever had made the sound sounded a lot bigger than a squirrel or something harmless. In my mind's eyes, I was picturing either a boar or a gator, neither of which was a good thing. Now, years of doing stupid shit together had locked us together. Jimmy, Tony, and I instantly started walking backward ever so slowly and ever so lightly. I guess there are some carryover skills to being delinquents. About 20 more feet of that, and another violent brush shaking happened, followed by what sounded almost like a snarl. You know that sound when 2 dogs suddenly go nuts on each other? That growl that sounds like it tore the air. I get the 3 silent taps on my shoulder. It's Tony, and that's our silent code to run as fast as fucking possible in about 3 seconds. I'm not arguing. And tap Jimmy in the dark. We had been pulling closer to each other as we pulled back, so at this point, it was shoulder to shoulder. As we turned away and ran, and I mean fast, we were criminals, I got about 6 steps before something slams into the back of me. I can hear cans falling out of the bag and popping. I smell like beer. I ran even harder, 5 minutes of pure running full out, and sounds of the chase go silent. 5 minutes after that, we stop running as we come to the crossing where Kyle turned back. "Hey, help me cross," Kyle says from the other bank. I guess he decided to man up. The shot rings out over the water and Kyle falls over backward, holding a bullet wound to his chest. I dive at Tony, pointing. We struggle, and he is fighting me, but I had him from the pouncing first. I managed to yank the pistol free. Tony stares at me, wild-eyed. Two, Tony says. I say, 2 what? Legs, motherfucker. Kyle had 2 legs, Tony says. I point the gun at where he fell, and we start making our way over there. After we get to the scene, he is gone. A trail of blood leads through the brush and into the woods on the side of the bank. I start moving to follow the trail. Tony grabs my arm tight. "Check the car first. If Kyle isn't there, then we can go after him," Tony says. Now Tony is terrified. I don't really want to believe that my best friend just killed my other best friend, and Jimmy looks like he just wants to go home. So we turn towards the car. I still have the gun out, and I am listening hard to make sure Tony doesn't try to get it as much as anything else. We make it to the car, okay, and I just hand the gun back to Tony. Kyle's sleeping in the back seat, fake leg off and on the floor of the car. I wish I could tell you we went back to figure out exactly what happened, but we jumped in the car and sped off. All 3 of us agreed we definitely saw the top half of Kyle, and that was definitely Kyle's voice we heard. One of us may have hallucinated, but all 3 of us? The blood was real as well. I had some on my pant leg. I was more worried at first that we had killed someone than anything, when I remembered the backpack I had on. Speeding down the road back home at over 100, I pulled it off. The only thing left in it was 2 mangled Pabst Blue Ribbon cans. When I held up the pack, though, there was 4 shreds from claws. Nothing in it. Swamp has claws like that. Cougars don't go that deep into the bog, and the claws are more hand size. This looked more like a bear-sized claw, and whatever chased us was smaller and made sounds kind of like a wolf. I was still hallucinating by the time I got home, so I can't be 100% sure about anything. Nothing was ever on the news about it, no bodies ever found or cops looking into it. We got pulled into any investigation describing more than 2 teenagers by cops. I'm not saying for sure it was a skinwalker, but I don't know anything else that sounds like a wolf, claws like a bear, survives a gunshot, and perfectly imitates Kyle. If it wasn't for the extra leg, we would have walked right over to it with our guard down as well. So I told you that I had a couple of encounters that would kind of leave you creeped out and intrigued. In Central Florida, there was the tribe of the Timucua, and they believed that the world was inhabited by spirits, demons, and gods. These spiritual beings tried to influence people every day, and because of this, the natives turned to assistance from shamans. Now, that right there sounds to me like it was some sort of, I don't even know, skinwalker, some sort of Native American demon of the swamp. We've had discussions before that most Native American tribes have a version of the skinwalker, and the Timucua do as well. So that could have quite possibly been what those boys ran into. And the Idaho encounters. Oh, God. Just being young again. And both of these encounters, you know, just brought it back to stupid shit we did when we were young. And, just at the age of 16 and 17, we're fearless and we're curious, and God, you know, I could not imagine seeing a Dogman in a cemetery, though. That is truly terrifying. Really liked these encounters. I definitely did. And I hope you guys did as well. I got some interviews coming up with Lewis. Lewis had to go to the hospital. He had an accident just about a week ago. About a week and a half ago. Hopefully I can get him on the show for Wednesday. I got a couple of other guys that are going to come on and share their encounters with us. And I've got a friend of mine who is in Maine and had a Sasquatch encounter, and he wants to share it with us. So we got a lot to look forward to, guys. And if you guys have an encounter that you want to share, either you want it narrated or you want to come on, my email is in the description below, or it's nadolny.m.jeff@gmail.com. And with that, guys, I'm going to bid you farewell.